Queens Assemblyman Zohran Mamdani is also a man with a lot of passionate concerns. But first, I want to talk to you about the protests that are going on throughout the city on college campuses and your take on what's going on.
Well, I think what we're seeing is young people standing up to say that this violence that's taking place in Palestine in their name and with their tax dollars is something that they cannot allow for any longer. And what I have seen at so many of these campuses is a decision by Mayor Adams to introduce danger into these situations by sending in hundreds of armed police officers. And as we saw at Columbia just on Tuesday night, one of whom fired a gun in the process of that entry into the campus.
So do you think that the mayor was wrong to send the NYPD in to Hamilton Hall to break up the fact that they had taken over and occupied a building?
Absolutely, I think he was wrong, because for so long as Democrats we've been saying that the most dangerous thing for a student in their learning environment or in their living residence is the presence of a gun. And here we have a Democratic mayor sending in cops that we saw photos of entering into rooms with guns drawn, and that is unacceptable. And the fact that it was discharged.
See, here, I guess the question is this: is having tent encampments different than occupying a building where you've had to break a window to get in, where they took desks and furniture to block things, and so there was property damage? Is there a difference between the two things?
Well, I think that we have to understand that the building was taken over only after the administration forced these students to leave the lawn. And if you see Columbia's campus, where they were situated is not a place that actually blocks anyone from going anywhere. It's a small grassy area of the green where you can join in if you want to, and you can walk around it if you need to.
So the thing is that what's interesting to me also is that there's been sort of a disagreement among the Democratic conference in Albany about what to do about what's going on. There are some people who support the protest. There's some people who say they're concerned about anti-Semitism. And also there was a letter that was released by the Democratic Socialists of America, a group that supports you, that says you support the protest, but you're against anti-Semitism. How do you prevent the protest from devolving into anti-Semitism and Jew hate, which has been expressed by a lot of people?
So, I think one of the key ways you do that is to ensure that when you enter into an encampment, there's a shared set of agreements as to what you're entering into and what you're going to say and what you believe. And at Columbia, they made it very clear that entering into that space meant you were entering into a space with no room for anti-Semitism, because that is my belief and so many others. Yet what happened a lot of times is that you had remarks that were being said and shared by people outside of the campus, and using those remarks to characterize what was happening on the campus. Because the protest and the fight against anti-Semitism are not actually in conflict. They are one and the same.
But yet what the protesters were asking is for Columbia to divest from any involvement in Israel, which some people took as anti-Semitism.
So that's where I disagree with that interpretation, where I think anti-Semitism is specifically about religion, whereas some people want to use the definition of it to extend to any criticism of Israel, where I think that is a completely different nature, and that's actually political speech, not hate speech.
So what you're saying is that anti-Zionism is what?
Anti-Zionism is a political belief. Anti-Semitism is when you express feelings specifically because someone is Jewish.
So basically the anti-Zionism would be the dealing with the territory of Israel.
Yes.
And what's going on in Gaza.
Yes, and I think it's important to separate the two because, there's an assumption of a monolith amongst Jewish Americans when in fact there's a real diversity of opinion when it comes to Israel. And so many of the supporters of Israel in this country are not Jewish. They're actually, many of them are Christian. So we have to separate these things out from a religious issue to a political issue.
But have you been troubled by the rhetoric that seems to have spurned hate?
Absolutely. I'm troubled by any of rhetoric that is spreading hate, and I think that there isn't any place for anti-Semitism in our society or in our protests, and I think that that commitment to eradicate that hate is one that has to be shared universally, because what also troubles me is oftentimes it is very selectively applied. For example, at UCLA, we had pro-Israel protesters who attacked the students on that campus with baseball bats and fireworks and rhetoric of genocide and ethnic cleansing, wishing it upon these students, and yet it was only described as clashes when in fact it was a violent attack.
So here's my question to you. I know you had some experience with protesting because you went on a hunger strike after the October 7th situation where you were calling for a ceasefire. Can you tell me about your experience doing that?
So I went on a hunger strike in Washington, D.C. in front of the White House for about a week with a number of other legislators as well as activists and even actors and cultural figures. And we went on that hunger strike because we were saying that for all of the tens of thousands of people that have been killed by Israeli bombs, more Palestinians will actually die from starvation. And we were depriving ourselves of food to make it clear that this is what Biden's policies are depriving Palestinians of. And that was back in December. Now we're seeing regular updates of Palestinians, especially children, dying from malnutrition.
So do you feel that you accomplished anything by doing it, or that it fell on deaf ears?
I think we took steps forward in that those 5 days were days where we motivated people to take action. We got press to pay attention to this issue. But the fact that this starvation is continuing unabated shows that the issue is far from resolved.
And what was your reaction to the president finally speaking out about the demonstrations and about what should be done about them? He spoke just a few days ago.
I was quite disappointed, frankly, because he characterized these protests as violent when studies have shown that 99% of these student encampments are peaceful. And there is something to this, which is that free speech being framed as oppositional to order, when in fact civil disobedience is critical to democracy. And our president has said time and again, this is the fight to save democracy. These students are doing just that.
But seeing as you understand what's going on in the student world there, I wonder if you think the Democrats and the party you actually also belong to are in any danger of losing support in the presidential election because students feel disaffected and they feel that their views are not being represented by the Democratic Party.
I'm absolutely terrified of that. I am concerned that right now it is looking increasingly difficult for President Biden to defeat Trump, and that must be the ultimate mission of what we have this November. And yet President Biden's decisions with regards to Gaza and Palestinians is putting that victory in jeopardy.
Does he need to change his policies?
Absolutely.
And to what?
You know, I think he needs to end this war. And we know that he can do it because when the 7 aid workers were killed by Israel, he made a phone call and Netanyahu opened up aid passageways that he said were impossible to open up. If President Biden called Netanyahu today and said, you need to end this war, and we are going to make sure that you do that by conditioning and ending the military billions of dollars of funding we send you, we know that would end this war. But instead, our president is leaking out that he's disappointed with Netanyahu while continuing to send him billions of dollars and thousands of bombs, and he's watching the coalition that he built his presidency on come apart at the seams.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it right there for now, but our conversation continues right after the show on our streaming channel, CBS News New York.